show it to you, the controversy surrounding this case. But I can tell you now, today, in the whole time that I've researched this case, 2 people came to me and said, but what about this and what about that? On the controversy. And that to this day, they couldn't prove it. So what I'm saying to you, I'm going to explain to you how I found the wreck, what we found at the wreck, and what happened on the night of the accident. That I can tell you. This accident was a plain aviation incident. That's what it was. And you can say what you want, you can think what you want, you can go into the books that was written about long arms this and long whatever. Nobody can create an accident like this. There's no way you can do it. And I'll explain why. This accident to this day was forgotten in the East London area. Now it's been reborn because of our search there. I'll explain to you now. Now let's look at 1967. You'll recognize some of it. I don't. But yeah, it was that was real money. That's real money.
Yeah.
That was Miss South Africa 1967. They somehow had funny costumes with stuff. And then Save the Last Dance was released by Gene Rockwell, incidentally. The Mercedes factory was opened in East London on that year. Chris Barnard gave somebody a new life in terms of his heart. And the Grand Prix was big news in 1967. In fact, it was so big news that it dominated the news until the 13th of March. Something happened. Right. We started with flights to nowhere, as Athol has mentioned before, and that evolved into plane wreck hunter. In other words, I've done the cases where aircraft is missing. There are 10 cases in the South African history from the 1960s. 10 only. Some of them we will never find. I can tell you now we won't find them. I'll explain that later. But I'm just going to talk to you quickly about 3 cold cases I was involved in, and we're actually filming this one again for a new series. In 1980, a Piper Cherokee 180 took off from Wouter. They went to Swartkop. I'm sure you remember that case. 2 army guys, they got lost. They landed on a road in Leidenburg, and then they took off and they disappeared. Okay, let me give you some background on that. In order to understand what happened on that day, I took a Cessna 210, flew to Groblersdal, and as I came into Groblersdal, I marked some spot there between the vineyards and stuff, and I said, I'm going to land, take off again, and see if I can find that spot by turning the other way. I did that. I took off with this 210, I came around and I couldn't find it. That was the backbone of this problem in this accident. When these guys landed on the road, they were facing north on the road. The guy that stopped with the Mercedes or the car, the old guy, he said to them, listen, there's Swartkop, 38 k's away, there it is. So they got into their plane. The wind on the day was from the left. So what does he do? He takes off from the road, turns left, and loses situational awareness. But he remembered to fly east. So they flew east in the direction of Lorenzo Marx that time. He didn't have any fuel left because before he landed on the road, he flew around looking for Swartkop. And then they got back, turned around, according to the records that we can find, and they got lost in the place where you will not find them. Easy. God's window. That's where they are. Okay. That's the guy who got lost. We only found a photo of him from his brother after we've done the case on television. And his brother said me, that's the guy that got lost. There's your piper in the fishing net. On the 8th of December 1964, a guy with a brand new Cherokee 180 came from Cape Town, landed in Durban, wanted to start some agency for models and stuff. He did some funny stuff before the time. And then he phoned a lady and said, listen, I'm going to kill myself. And he went to the airport. She phoned the airport. She said, listen, tamper with the wheel. They tampered with the wheel, it didn't help. He took off, he flew around for 3 hours talking to the tower in Durban and he disappeared. About a year later, well, about 2 years later, a guy in a fishing trawler snagged a plane. And as it came up, the windows were inside were green and sort of, with all the marine growth on it. And he couldn't see if there was somebody in it. And as they brought it up, it tore the net and went back down. It was the same plane. He doesn't know the registration whether it was the same, but it was the only plane that was lost in that area. So that must have been the plane. Now the mystery is, did he get out and swim back to shore and took on a new life because he was a very wealthy guy? Or did he drown? Did he try to come back to shore after thinking maybe I shouldn't kill myself and fell into the ocean? We don't know. Okay, so that's mystery number 2. And the last one, you remember the helicopter that fell in the Knysna? So I'm just going to say one thing about this. After this helicopter was found in 2006, everybody said this lady had jewels and she had lots of stuff with her. And she, all kinds of money, and it's not true. I worked extensively with the 2 sons of these people, especially the one who lives in Pretoria, and we went through the whole thing. And there's one last thing I want to say about this. I saw the pictures as they found the records, something you don't want to see. He said on the day that they disappeared, the week that they disappeared, they were looking for them in a helicopter. He said to me, but what about that hole in the forest there? No, it couldn't be there. It's impossible, it couldn't be there. And that's when they found them, 7 years later. So if they went there that day, they would have found them. Right. Let's go to the background of the Rietbok. It was a South African Airways flight, scheduled flight, because by count, call sign was South Africa or SA 406, named the Rietbok, on the 13th of March 1967. The incident took place between 1830 and 1930, more after 7 o'clock at night than before. I'll show that to you now. The route was Port Elizabeth to East London, and it had 25 souls on board, 5 crew and 20 packs. Now this is important. The weather at East London was stormy with drizzle, 200 to 300 feet cloud base. The visibility was a 3/4 mile. Bear that in mind.
Nice.
This is also important. Do you know the QNH? Do you know what QNH is? I hope.
Sorry, explain please.
It's the pressure altitude that you set on your altimeter. So I'll explain it in the next slide. It's better. Okay. Just that's the background. Now, the chain of events was as follows, and we had to follow the chain of events, which in the initial investigation, we had to find out where the flight started, what training did the personnel have, the personal development and environmental influence, the life events that happened before the flight of the people, of the crew, the technical issues, if any, the technology of the day, the time it happened, the weather, very important, the interaction between the crew, cockpit resources management, and then the occurrence. Right, so that was the backbone of the chain of, or sequence of events of the investigation. Just note there, all results are based on information researched, supplied, published, and investigated. Okay. Now, here it starts. This was confirmed by 2 or 3 of the pilots who actually flew the Viscounts those times. You'll see that there is virtually no coast or water or coastline between Port Elizabeth and East London. So you can fly straight. But in the 60s, some of the pilots, and it happened in Alexander Bay, we've researched it everywhere, we spoke to the guys and they said, if the weather is bad, the guys who flew from Port Elizabeth to East London flew over the coast to avoid cumulogranitus, rocks and mountains. Okay. So, this is what happened on the day. The question was, why was he over the ocean? It wasn't necessary. That's the reason. He chose to take the coastal route in order to avoid any mountains and terrain in bad weather. If you take off from PE, they tell you your QNH should be 1024, the setting on your altimeter. In other words, it tells you exactly how high you are. The air pressure, it's very technical, but that's what it boils down to. Okay, so if you go through and you go to flight levels, you go to QNE, then the whole world changes to 1013, so everybody knows where everybody is. And if you say you're at flight level 90, then the next guy at flight level 10 with the same setting on his altimeter is 1,000 foot above. So that's separation. That's what it's all about. Okay. Those were the QNHs on the day. Then we started the search for the wreck. First went to the official report. There was a little bit of a problem with the official report. It was not complete for certain things, which I'll show you. We went to the media, which is a bad source, by the way. Then I'll explain that later. Investigation, we took the factual information. You are not allowed to do an investigation not based on facts. And you have to have hard facts. You cannot speculate or assume. And if you do assume and you don't get later confirmation of what your assumption is, you can forget it. You must take it out. There's no way you can do that. Reconstruction of events and the timeline. Now, the golden rule in any investigation, especially a cold investigation, is the timeline. If you can do the timeline, you're halfway there. The timeline needs to make sense. I'll show you now. Elimination of speculation and non-related issues. And this was where the controversy came in. It didn't have an effect on the flight. We needed to reconstruct the actual flight. Okay. Now, you can imagine in 1967 the scientific analysis of environment and local conditions. Where did we get the local conditions? There are records of it. Very good records of it. The weather, the cloud base, from long before that, especially on the coastline. All the weather stations on the coastline, you can actually go back to 1945, 1955. You can do whatever you like. You can get that information. Right. So that helped us a lot. And then the physical search for the wreck started. And in order to do that, we had to reconstruct the flight. Here's the search timeline. We used the official accident report, although based on available information, it lacked reconstruction of events in full. You can go read it, it's on the internet. It was compiled with technology available in 1967. There was no CDR, no FDR, and they didn't have the record. Okay, so that's a bit of a problem. Not all possible scenarios were considered in the official investigation. I'll show you why. Conclusions, therefore, was incomplete. By the way, the official coordinates where they say the wreck is it's not there. It's definitely not there. We went to it. It's not there. So it was a guesstimate of where the official wreck is lying. Now, the first guy said to me, but the wreck could have moved. I said, you can't move upstream with the sea currents because the prevailing sea currents are from the north down. Okay. Unique case for the time period, aviation was still relatively young, and I'm saying this in terms of all aspects, CRM, technology, all that kind of stuff. It was really still very young. And then came the problem, the media. Communication technology played a major role. There was a case where a person in Johannesburg phoned one of the people who saw the plane fall. And the story that came out, instead of checking facts, they published it. For some reason. I don't know what. And we did a test. We took 3 people, we put them next to one another at Swartkop Airport. and we did something with a helicopter, flew around and did some funny stuff. And then we asked them afterwards to please write down what they saw. Literally, each one saw something different. Okay, not accessible to broader public, word of mouth came into play. Word of mouth is a problem. You remember the old game telephone? You sit in the... What's happened here? Everybody added a bit of stuff. Speculation and controversy in order to increase the reader numbers. That's what the media did wrong. They added the controversy because the two passengers that were on board were controversial. And they focused on them. I'll tell you who they were. Those are some of the newspaper clippings of the day. Just interestingly, you see this? This was written from a telephone call from Johannesburg to... Ja, hier sal 21 mense wat hier lê. Hulle lê op die strand. Didn't happen. Okay. Right, so that's false. Right. The closest they came to the bodies was the South African Navy, who saw the bodies being taken out to sea. In a stormy night, they couldn't even pick the bodies up. It was too stormy. Right, so there's some of the media. And remember this guy sort of sparked a lot of things. Professor Peruvat, he was they focused on him there, he's again. You'll see most of these, they put his face in. Okay, now the research started. We did interviews with pilots and aviation experts and said, place yourself into the position of the pilot and explain to us what you think. So we did a lot of interviews. Interviews with marine experts and researchers. We had a Professor Tommy Borman at the University of Port Elizabeth. He's part of SAAF. I'm sure you know those people. They do research in the coastline for the university. And interestingly enough, in the television series, we did an interview with him and he said, I think you will find the wreck after looking at all the conditions. We took all the coastal conditions from 1967 right up to last year, and we saw what could have happened to the wreck. Right, then interaction and gathering of information from local persons and community. I'm going to quickly tell you what happened. Professor Tommy Borman said to us, the wreck should start breaking up after about, I think he said 49 to 50 years. I then went to Kaiser Beach where the wreck stuff came out, and I found a lady who went to the beach every single day. She's been living there for 30 years. And I said, her name is Colleen. She's still there, still looking for me for the wreck. And she said to me, I said to her, have you picked up some metal stuff like metal or aluminum? She said, yeah, no, she has. I said, show me. She brought me a bucket full. I said, when did you start picking up this stuff on the coastline? She said, 6 years. Exactly on the timeline that the professor said. So that's when the wreck started breaking. Technical analysis of technology on board the Rietbok, I'll get back to that. That was a very big factor in this case. And then the reconstruction of the flight electronically and physically. We had to do that. The analysis of the flight crew personal credentials, we've done that. Flight characteristics of the Vickers Viscount type and model. At what speed did they come in for landing or final approach, 140 knots, and all that kind of stuff. So we had to go through that. Analysis of the weather conditions related to flight SA406. It was all available. All of it was available. Interaction between ATC and flight crew. Now there is a problem. The official report said that this was said and this was said and this was said, which is fine. And then we thought we need the official documents that was typed out between the day after the accident, between the ATC and the pilots. We needed those official documents. And we got them, but I'll tell you how. Reconstruction of the debris that was found. I'll explain that to you now. Condition of remaining wreck, or the main wreck, if any. The possible salvageable pieces of the wreck for display in the museum. The actual search for the wreck then commenced, and this is what we compiled from the investigation. It was a normal scheduled flight in terms of standard operating procedure. No technical issues with the aircraft was reported officially. No, nothing. Enough fuel for the flight, with reserves, even with the diversion to Johannesburg if needed. Okay? The aircraft was not overloaded, although heavy fuel load and in case of diversion. The crew was duly qualified and certified. The weather was extremely marginal and variable from an aviation point of view. Technology on board the aircraft was challenging and basic for the era. One thing I'll show you now was the weather radar. That was a problem. The eyewitness accounts were not ideal due to weather and aviation knowledge. The sea conditions and weather made the rescue efforts extremely challenging. Okay, pieces of wreckage that washed up were mostly from the nose section. The crash was extremely violent and severe, and the location of the wreck was speculated and not accurate. I just need to show you something. That was the water. The aircraft came in. Left wing low. Not that low, but left wing low. That's the nose. So, it hit the water, nose, that wing touched the water. That wing. It then came over, and this part broke off. It was disintegrated, which meant that the water rushed into the cockpit, or into the cabin. And we know that because when we saw the wreck, we found it. That's exactly what happened. Okay? And this is the part that came out the day after and the next week. This was we reconstructed all the pieces that came out, and it came only from the nose. So the rest was still under the water. The altimeter readings and Q&A settings, although we don't think that was a factor in the accident, there was no proof that it was ever done by the crew. From Q&E, from QFE to QNH, we don't have a proof that it was done. So we can't go on that much. The final approach, we didn't know exactly why he did it and how he did it, but we found some information. How did the pilot determine his distance from East London? This is interesting. On the weather radar in those years, you had the weather radar that it was better on ground features than it was on weather. Do you remember that? Some of you flew those planes. So the weather radar was better on ground features. Now, on the weather radar, you have rings like this, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles, 20 miles. And he could see, that's what he said, he could see the land features. So they asked him, how far are you from East London? And he could determine on the weather radar when he started seeing land features. That's how he knew. Okay, missing original APC transcript confirmation. So we needed the actual transcript that was typed on the day after the incident. It's there in that frame. Was the pilot able to determine where and at what height he was above the water? No, he was not. Okay. Let me explain. Right. We don't think that the QNH was a factor in this accident. We don't think so. The pilot switched, when he came down from 9-0, he switched to visual. He wanted to see, he wanted to get under the clouds. And he was over the coastline, and at Christmas Rock was an unofficial point where they did what they call an S-turn. They were over the coast. East London is there, 1-0. It's now 1-1, but it was 1-0. They turned, went over the land, and landed at 1-0. That's the S-turn. It was an unofficial procedure that the pilots did in those years. That's the approach on the day, this one. And that's today. So you'll see 1-0, 1-1, as you know. So that was the plate that he should have used for an NDB approach. And you can see it's from the coast side. They told him 1-0 is not available for landing. And he said, I will attempt landing on 1-0. And you'll understand why when we go through it. That's our problem there. The weather radar is over there. Now, if you're looking out and flying an aircraft in bad weather. And you have to do this to see where you are all the time, or what the weather is doing. It's distracting. That's the Viscount's weather radar there. So it was not like today over here. Another distraction to the pilot. So what do you do after a while? You start disregarding the radar and looking out the window to see where you are and can you see the coastline and so forth. Okay, so that was one of the problems. His last or his second last words were East London, we are now 20 miles out, which he saw there, and we are seaward of the coastline and descending through 4,000 feet. He was not at 4,000 feet. This article was published in the Daily Dispatch and in the Eastern Cape Herald. And on the Saturday, this article was published. On the Monday, a guy walked into the newspaper office with a hoodie, a mask, dark glasses, and he took an envelope. I'll show you the envelope now. He placed it at security. He says, please, they must send it to me urgently from Port Elizabeth. And inside the envelope, we found everything we suspect looked like that. The missing weather information, not missing, the confirmed weather information, the transcript between the tower and the captain on the night. We found the SAAF procedural information, what you do in what kind of weather, that kind of, just all there of the time. And you'll see a copy of his last words on that. There's the page. You can go and read it. Those were his last words before the plane disappeared. Right, that what you'll see there. You'll see there was no QNH requested or supplied, even if he was below transition level. It was not supplied. And it's proven there. His descent rate was 1,000 feet per minute throughout, from 90 down to the crash. It was exactly 1,000 feet per minute. We followed the timeline, and I'll show that to you now. This is from what we researched. We are very certain the pilot saw at Kaiser Beach. He couldn't see the sea. This is what the weather was like. And he maybe saw some lights on the coastline, and that's why he said, I see the lights on the coast. And remember, this is called the black hole effect. He was not aware how high he was above the water. He was not. He didn't see the ocean. And he tried to get under the clouds. Normally, he was at 2 minutes past 7. He was at flight level -0. We hope he changed to 1013. We don't know. Then he started his descent. This is what he should have done. The green. I'll show you the red now. Down to 4,000, then down to 2,000. Now, remember, the cloud base is very, very low here. Okay, if he did the NDB approach, he would have ended up, no problem, in East London. What actually happened is the following. I will prove that to you if you want to sit with me afterwards. This is the actual flight path at each and every time that was reconstructed. At 1907, local time, he was at 4,000 feet. At 9 minutes past 7, he was at 2,000 feet. Work that out a bit. It's 1,000 feet per minute that he descended. Do you see that there? That's all confirmed on the transcript. So now what happened? He's now in cloud. And then what happens? He gets to the S-turn at Christmas Rock, which is there. Now he's almost on the ocean. He commences the left turn and he commences the left turn and crashes into the sea. The stuff that came out, what we saw at the red, everything confirms this. The left wing broke off. The cabin split open at the top from the water rushing in. flushing everybody inside out. The sea currents on the day were from the coast to the deep sea. So what will the bodies do? Deep sea. That's exactly what the South African Navy saw. The bodies going out to sea from the oil slick. We took the oil slick, which is the coordinates they used in the official report, and we worked out what the sea currents were on the day. We found out that where the oil slick came out at Kaiser Beach, we traced it back and it came directly to the debris field which we found. So we were on the spot. Right. The final seconds, we're almost done. Captain Lukowski descended at 1,000 feet per minute to clear the cloud base. They reach the so-called S-turn point, as I've just explained. With no way to determine their height above the water, the crew commenced the left turn towards the coastline at Christmas Rock. I cannot tell you exactly where the wreck lies, but it's not far from there. The Vickers Viscount then impacts the water with the left wing low. One eyewitness said he saw the aircraft coming past Kaiser Beach in a left turn. If you can believe it, but that's what happened. The left wing, in all probability, separates from the fuselage, which we found was true, and the cockpit area then impacts the water. That's the stuff that came out. Right. The force of the impact disintegrates the front of the plane, resulting in water rushing into the cabin and the fuselage with tremendous force. 140 knots that hit the water. Okay. The fuselage would then, in all probability, split open, which it did, and the passengers and cargo forced out at the top. Exactly what happened. It was all over in less than 10 seconds. Okay. This is the controversy. I'm not going to go too much into it. There were two controversial passengers, Miss Rosenthal, she was US citizen, and Professor J.P. Brevet from PE. Now we do know that Professor Brevet was on his way to pick Wouter or somebody to go and tell him some stuff.
Yeah,
Okay. And this, I will, if you want this, I will give it to you, but there was South African Miss Rosenthal. She didn't know he was there, and he didn't know she was there. So it was a question of, they weren't together on the flight. It was two separate people doing the flight and properly. Okay, so please, and remember, we wanted to find the wreck. We didn't want to find out who Rietbok off. This is part 2. The plane was brought down. Public fascination with more than meets the eye. That was where the plane was brought down story started. Don't spoil a good story with facts, please. Okay, and then the media interests. The media is to blame for this. You cannot believe what came out from the media. It was a unique occurrence for the time period, as you know. We don't have a lot of SAAF accidents. And so forth. The tragic case of the Rietbok was an aviation accident, and any controversy, speculation, theory, resulting consequences, or any other subsequent occurrences in no way linked to the crash itself. We've proven that. Okay. The crash might have sparked the event. That's true, but also became a platform for anyone to add various angles and false facts, which to this day has never been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Just to give you a quick story. One of the policemen that was on the scene where they cordoned off Kaiser Beach, as the stuff came out, I said to him, why did they cordon it off? He says, because we were told we have to look for a certain briefcase. I said, whose briefcase? He said, Miss Rosenthal's briefcase. I said, what's in the briefcase? He said, I don't know. We were told we want to see what's in it. I said, you cordon off a whole beach for a briefcase. Do you really think that if a plane crashes in the sea, the briefcase is going to pop up at Kaiser Beach? He says, no, maybe we were mistaken. That was his answer. So, right, we found the wreck. It was not at the official speculated wreck site. Two debris fields approximately 1.5 kilometers apart were found. Okay? The first debris field was with the heavy pieces. And hit the water, the heavy stuff, the wings, stuff was lying in the first debris field. And then the lighter stuff was taken with the current towards Kaiser Beach. That's the second debris field. Okay? At approximately 1.5 kilometers apart. It's exactly 3.5 kilometers from the shoreline. That's where the wreck sites are. But here's the trick. It lies at 65 meters. You cannot dive with normal equipment. You have to have special diving equipment, which we have. We had a team that dived on the Oceanos. They have about 5 bottles around them. They can only stay down for 20 minutes. And they have to come up 3 hours. Come up. The large pieces in the debris field is closest to East London. It lies on the East London side, which means that it went down and then the lighter pieces came back to Kaiser Beach. Shifting sand and seafloor and the strong currents is a bad threat to us for recovering the pieces and finding the wreck. We really had a big struggle. In one case, we had to drop the divers 3 kilometers from the wreck site to go down like that, and we picked them up 3 kilometers that way. That's how strong the currents are. Okay, the sand also sometime in the year closes up the wreck. So you can only find it if you know where it is or metal detector. Special diving equipment was required, which we did use. The recovery is directly influenced by the weather. I'll tell you now about the recovery. Only 2 pieces will be recovered, if possible, the size of a table. Because we want to give 1 piece to the East London Museum, which is in their area. They'll have a permanent display of it, and the other piece goes to the South African Airways Museum at Rand Airport. Only those pieces. The rest will be guarded as a wreck site and a grave. So we won't mess around with it. The rest will remain as a grave site for the victims. And now, I'm going to show you the last image of what you'll see on the equipment that we used. One of the wreck pieces you'll see on the equipment. It's not a photograph, it's an image. And I'll explain to you now. That's what it looks like. Now that is flat bottom. So what it means is the boat's doing this in the swell. So now you get that kind of thing. So that piece, that is a very large piece of the wreck. It doesn't look like that. It has to be compacted. So that was one small part of the wing. Just to give you an idea of what we have produced. And the last one. Let's not forget the lessons learned, for which ordinary people paid their lives so that future generations can benefit in terms of safer and more secure future. Now, what you do here is the same. We preserve you. And that's what that accident did. It brought about a lot of change, benefiting everybody after that. So that's my story. Now you are most welcome.
Yep.
Take me on. Okay, you wanted to say something?
Yep.
Well, are there any questions? Maybe?
Yes, please go ahead.
Were there any flight recorders and whether?
Sorry?
Were there any flight recorders?
No. Like I said in the beginning, no FDR, no CDR, nothing. Anything else? Yes.
Yes, sir. You were going to answer about the QNH and QNE.
Yeah. I will explain it to you.
As a, I know, from an engineering point
Yes.
of view, 830 kPa engine. But the people I've spoken to at 1013.
Yeah.
May you please elaborate?
Yeah. As soon as you get to a certain altitude, the transition altitude or level above the airport, we need all the planes in the world to have the same optimum setting. That's why it's 101. Everyone in the world, doesn't matter who they are. If they fly on flight levels, they change to 1013, so that we know if a guy says he's at 6,000, he's at 6,000. So it's easy as that. We will let you all know when the document is released, and you can actually see it. But we're busy. We will film the recovery of the wreck first before we release the documents. It's very bad visibility. It's like diving in coffee.
As chairman of the Friends of the Air Force Museum Pretoria branch, Wouter, I want to honestly and I want to thank you for your presentation. And what a pleasure that we bumped into each other at Rand Airport before the air show.
Yes.
And here's the end result of the conversation. It's wonderful to have you here, and we're going to make him a friend of the Air Force Museum. And he's going to support us in the future. We've had our little bit of discussion and that is wonderful. As chairman, being a model collector, dealer, and an old soldier, when I spoke to Wouter, he was interested in getting a model of a Viscount. I struggled. I've actually ordered from overseas a Corgi Classic Aviation Archive, the best model you can find. They're rather expensive, but I scratched through my collection and I hauled out an old dinky toy Viscount, which we hope you can cherish.
Oh, that's beautiful. Can you believe it? You never see them.
You don't see them anymore. Sorry, it is. It's also had a dip in the ocean.
No, it's authentic.
But there it is. And this is from the Friends of the Air Force Museum. My contact particulars are under the, what you call it, and if you're interested in a bigger and more expensive model, well, okay, we can talk business, but this is for you.
Thank you.
No,
This is a prize donation. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
And I promise you, you will know when we take the red pieces out. You will know when we do. You'll see it in the news. Thank you.